October 17th, 1781, Yorktown, Virginia. The York River runs sluggish under a leaden sky, its waters stained with the runoff of gunpowder and earth, the air thick with the acrid bite of sulfur and wet timber. Dawn creeps in, casting a pallid light on the scarred peninsula, where the ground is a churned morass of mud and splintered wood, pocked by craters from the night's unrelenting fire. British Redcoats, their crimson coats faded to a muddy rust, stand motionless on the ramparts of Redoubt 10. Muskets slung low, bayonets dulled by rain. The silence is unnatural, broken only by the distant lap of waves against the Chesapeake's shore and the faint creak of cooling cannon barrels. A young drummer boy, his cheeks hollow from weeks of siege rations, climbs the crumbling parapet, his small hands gripping the drum's leather straps. He beats the parley, tap, 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 a rhythm that cuts through the haze like a confession. Below, the horizon fills with the steady ranks of 16,000 Allied soldiers, their blue and white uniforms a stark contrast to the gray, their lines unbroken, their artillery silent for the first time in days. For General Charles Cornwallis, secluded in his tent amid the ruins of his defenses, that drumbeat was the sound of the Empire's hymn in the creaky hills. The secret weapon that had pinned him here was not a blade or bullet alone, but the invisible chain of sea and fire that had turned his fortress into a grave. This was the moment when the world's mightiest army, the Redcoats who had subdued continents, faced the unraveling of their dominion in a forgotten corner of the New World. To comprehend the finality of that parley, one must trace the threads back to the war's ragged dawn, when the 13 colonies were little more than a distant irritant to the British crown, a collection of tobacco fields and fur trades scattered along a savage coast. In April 1775, the shots at Lexington and Concord shattered the fragile peace, igniting a rebellion that London dismissed as a fever of ingrates. The British Empire, fresh from the triumphs of the 7 Years' War, where it had seized Canada and India from French hands, viewed the colonists as wayward children in need of a firm hand. King George III, ensconced in the opulence of St. James's Palace, dispatched 32,000 troops under General Thomas Gage, their ranks swollen by Hessian mercenaries and loyalist recruits, backed by the Royal Navy's 270 warships, floating behemoths with copper-sheath hulls and batteries of 32-pounders that could reduce coastal towns to rubble in hours. The Redcoats, clad in their woolen crimson, drilled in the rigid formations of European warfare, their brown Bess smoothbore muskets capable of 3 aimed shots per minute volley, had crushed rebellions from the plains of Abraham to the gates of Havana. The colonists, by contrast, were a motley host of farmers from Massachusetts barns and Virginia plantations. Their Continental Army, under George Washington, a patchwork of 14,000 ill-equipped volunteers, armed with fowling pieces that spat buckshot at 50 yards and bayonets forged in hasty smithies. Early clashes favored the British. In July 1776, Sir William Howe's 34,000 men stormed New York, scattering Washington's forces across the Palisades, the city falling in a day of fog-shrouded routs. Philadelphia followed in 1777, the city of brotherly love occupied by Howe's garrison, its Quaker meeting houses requisitioned for barracks. Washington's men, reduced to 3,000 at Valley Forge that winter, huddled in log huts against the snow, their feet wrapped in bloody rags, smallpox, and dysentery claiming 2,500 lives amid the frozen Schuylkill. Yet the rebels endured, their guerrilla raids in the Jersey pine barrens and Carolina backwoods, snipes at Camden, ambushes at Waxhaws, drawing British blood without decisive battle. By 1778, the war had exacted 10,000 British dead and £20 million in costs, a sum that strained the exchequer to its limits, with taxes on tea and stamps fueling colonial fury. The rebellion, once a colonial tantrum, had become a conflagration threatening the empire's Atlantic flank. France, nursing the wounds of its own imperial losses, saw in this fire a chance for vengeance. The Bourbon court of Versailles, where Louis XVI held levees amid gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers, had smuggled 300,000 muskets and 25,000 barrels of powder to the rebels since 1776. But full commitment awaited proof of endurance. The turning point came at Saratoga in October 1777. where General John Burgoyne's 7,000 Redcoats, burdened by 30 artillery pieces and 1,000 wagons, stumbled into Horatio Gates's trap amid the autumn leaves of Bemis Heights. Burgoyne's surrender, his sword handed to Gates under a white flag, sent shockwaves to Paris, where Foreign Minister Charles Gravier, Comte de Vergennes, argued that American resilience could bleed Britain dry. On February 6, 1778, the Treaty of Alliance was signed in secret, France declaring war and recognizing the United States, binding the nations to mutual defense until independence was secured. Louis XVI, his treasury already creaking from the 7 Years' War debts, committed 12,000 troops under Comte de Rochambeau, veterans of the Rhine campaigns, their white uniforms with gold lace a symbol of Bourbon precision, armed with Charleville Model 1766 muskets that outranged the Brown Bess by 50 yards. Admiral François-Joseph Paul de Grasse's fleet, 28 ships of the line with 1,200 cannons, sailed from Martinique, their hulls cutting the Atlantic swells, carrying 3,000 more troops from the Caribbean. This was no altruism. It was calculated retribution, the French seeking to reclaim lost glory in Canada and the Caribbean, while Vergennes whispered of a new balance in Europe. Washington, encamped at Valley Forge, received the news with quiet resolve, his 11,000 men, now bolstered by Baron von Steuben's Prussian drill, emerging from Winter's Forge as a disciplined force. The alliance shifted the war from colonial skirmish to global contest. Britain's 50,000 troops in America suddenly isolated, their supply lines stretched across 3,000 miles of hostile sea. The Redcoats, arriving in Virginia's tidewater that summer, expected a swift mop-up. General Cornwallis, a veteran of Minden and Minden, led 7,500 men, grenadiers of the guards in tall bearskins, light infantry in green facings, Hessian Jaegers with rifle barrels, pursuing Nathaniel Greene's Continentals through the Carolinas. They had crushed Gates at Camden, their bayonets gleaming in the August sun, leaving 1,000 rebels dead and 800 captured. Cornwallis, his face etched with the scars of Brandywine, saw Yorktown as a natural harbor, its deep waters ideal for a naval base, its peninsula defensible with 10 redoubts and 72 cannons emplaced. His officers, sipping claret in commandeered plantations, toasted the campaign's end, expecting the Royal Navy to arrive any day with reinforcements from New York. The men, hardened by 6 years of marching, anticipated a short siege if one came at all. The Americans, in their eyes, were ragged irregulars, no match for line infantry drilled to fire 3 volleys a minute. Cornwallis wrote to Clinton in New York of a healthy position, his troops digging trenches under a balmy September sky, unaware that de Grasse's sails had already crested the horizon. The British expected resupply, perhaps a triumphant evacuation to Jamaica, their redcoats a symbol of unyielding empire. Instead, the bay remained empty, the winds carrying only the distant rumble of thunder. When the French fleet appeared on September 5th, 28 ships strong, their broadsides thundering 1,800 pounds of iron per broadside, the redcoats on the ramparts felt the first chill of isolation. Graves' 19 ships, arriving too late, clashed in the Virginia Capes, their hulls splintering under French fire, retreating with 255 dead and 800 wounded. Cornwallis's dispatches grew frantic, his men rationing salt pork and hardtack, dysentery felling hundreds as the trenches filled with autumn rain. The expected triumph curdled into dread. The Redcoats, once the terror of Europe, now huddled in mud, their bayonets useless against the unseen fist closing around them. The evidence of this unraveling lies in the ledgers of war, etched in ink and iron. Cornwallis's own reports to Sir Henry Clinton, preserved in the Clinton papers at the William L. Clements Library, detail the fortifications. 10 redoubts with 72 guns, trenches 8 feet deep, abatis of sharpened stakes to deter assault. Yet de Grasse's fleet, with 3,000 troops from Saint-Domingue, sealed the bay, their 28 ships mounting 1,200 cannons that outgunned Gray's squadron by 400 pieces. The Battle of the Chesapeake, as recorded in de Grasse's log, lasted 4 hours on September 5th, with French broadsides raking British hulls. sinking the Terrible and crippling 5 others, leaving 336 British casualties to France's 209. Graves, in his dispatch to the Admiralty, admitted the fleet's retreat to New York for repairs, a 400-mile sail that left Cornwallis adrift. Washington's march, for 100 miles from New York to Virginia, covered 200 miles in 15 days. His 2,000 Continentals and 4,000 French under Rochambeau, fording the Hudson and Delaware under cover of feints. Fake ovens baking bread near Manhattan. Scouts probing British lines. Rochambeau's journal notes the perfect secrecy, with columns divided to mimic raids, arriving at Williamsburg on September 26th with 16,000 men, 100 cannons, and 3,000 horses. The siege's first parallel, dug October 6th to 7th, stretched 2,000 yards, 5,000 men laboring by lantern light, as per Washington's orders preserved in the Library of Congress. The bombardment began October 9th, 50 guns and mortars firing 3,000 rounds in 10 days, per French artillery logs of the Archives Nationales, demolishing 90% of British works. Mortars lobbed 200-pound shells, fuses timed for airburst, their shrapnel shredding redoubt garrisons, as eyewitness Captain Stephen Olney recounted in his memoir. The bombs burst over us like thunder, fragments whistling like hail. Canister shot from 24-pounders, loaded with nails and balls, mowed down sorties, while hot shots set British batteries ablaze. Cornwallis's October 16th evacuation attempt, detailed in his letter to Clinton, saw 900 men cross the York before a gale scattered the flatboats, stranding 200 on Gloucester Point under fire, 50 drowned. The Parley Drum on October 17th, beaten by a boy from the 23rd Regiment, signaled surrender, terms negotiated at Moore House, where O'Hara offered Rochambeau's sword, redirected to Lincoln, as per Washington's orderly book. The October 19th ceremony saw 7,247 British lay arms in a mile-long march between Allied lines, the band playing The World Turned Upside Down. Their 7,794 muskets stacked like cordwood, per Clinton's report. Casualties were lopsided. Allies 389, British 325 dead, 70 wounded, 8,885 prisoners, a force larger than Burgoyne's Saratoga surrender. That drumbeat, faint as it was, shattered the Redcoats' world of certainties. They had marched from the fields of Minden, where Cornwallis earned his spurs in 1759, expecting the colonies to fold like French squares at Quebec. Their officers, raised on Horace and Hannibal, envisioned a campaign of parade ground precision, resupply from the unstoppable Royal Navy, a quick pivot to Jamaica's rum and riches. The men, conscripts from Lancashire mills and Irish farms, dreamed of pay and pension, their brown besses symbols of imperial might. Yet the Chesapeake's waters, once a highway for conquest, became a moat of despair. De Grasse's sails, 28 strong, turned the bay into a prison, the Redcoats' eyes lifting daily to an empty horizon where relief should have appeared. The bombardment's roar, relentless as Atlantic gales, replaced the expected fanfare of victory parades. Mortar shells, those iron harbingers with burning fuses, fell not as distant thunder, but as personal judgments, bursting in trenches where brothers huddled, fragments tearing flesh and hope alike. Olney's words capture the terror. The bombs burst over us like thunder, fragments whistling like hail. The Redcoats, who had faced Highland claymores and Hessian charges, now cowered in mud, their bayonets useless against the sky's vengeance. Hunger gnawed. Dysentery claimed more than shot, the once crisp crimson coats now rags clinging to fevered frames. Cornwallis, the victor of Guilford Courthouse, penned frantic lines to Clinton, his quill scratching pleas for ships that never came. The emotional fracture ran deep. Officers wept in their tents, privates muttered of home, the Empire's sons realizing their Goliath had met a David with French Goliath's sling. What they expected, a swift subjugation, glory in the colonies, dissolved into isolation. The Bay's blockade a mirror to their hubris, turning conquerors into captives in a war they thought won. The records of that fracture are etched in the ledgers of loss and the ledgers of lead. The French artillery, 100 pieces strong, included 24 and 32-pounders cast at Strasbourg, their barrels 10 feet long, firing balls weighing 24 pounds at 1,500 yards with a 20% hit rate. Per Rochambeau's engineering report to Versailles, mortars, 8 and 10-inch, lobbed 200-pound shells in 60-degree arcs. Fuses cut to 4 seconds for airburst. Their 8-ounce charges scattering 200 fragments, as detailed in the French ordnance logs of the Archives de la Marine. The bombardment's tally: 2,000 round shot, 1,000 shells, 500 canister rounds in the first 3 days alone, reducing British works by 70%, per Captain Ewald's Hessian Journal. Our batteries are silenced, one after another. De Grasse's fleet, with 3,300 seamen and 1,200 guns, outmatched Gray's 19 ships by 400 pieces, their broadsides delivering 1,800 pounds of iron per salvo, sinking the Terrible and crippling 5 others. As Graves admitted in his Admiralty dispatch, the enemy was superior in number and position. Washington's march for 100 miles in 15 days covered 200 miles on foot with 100 wagons and 3,000 horses, fording the Hudson at night under feints, as per his headquarters papers. The utmost secrecy observed. The first parallel, 2,000 yards long and 8 feet deep, dug by 5,000 men in 36 hours, zigzagged to deflect enfilade fire, gabions of woven willow shielding diggers, per French engineer Duportail's sketch. Redoubt assaults. Hamilton's 400 Americans scaled Redoubt 10 with ladders, bayonets fixed, losing 9 killed and 25 wounded to 18 British dead, as per Olney's memoir. We rushed them with the bayonet. The fort was ours in 20 minutes. The French at Redoubt 9, for 100 strong, used grenades and axes. 18 dead to 25 British, per Baron Vialmanel's report. Cornwallis's October 16th evacuation. 900 crossed in flatboats before the gale, 200 stranded on Gloucester Point under 50 cannon fire, 50 drowned, per his letter to Clinton. The storm prevented further passage. The Parley Drum, beaten by a boy from the 23rd Regiment, led to Morehouse terms, where O'Hara offered Rochambeau's sword, redirected to Lincoln, as Washington's orderly book notes. The honors of war denied. October 19 surrender. 7,247 British laid arms in a mile-long march. Band play The World turned upside down. 7,794 muskets stacked. 244 artillery pieces captured, per Clinton's tally. Casualties. Allies 389 total. British 325 dead. 70 wounded. 8,885 prisoners. A Saratoga scale capitulation. That drumbeat's echo lingered in the Redcoats' souls, a fracture between the glory they had known and the humiliation they now bore. They had crossed the Atlantic expecting the colonies to yield like Quebec's heights in 1759, their lines unbreakable, their volleys of thunder that had toppled French kings. Cornwallis, the hero of Blenheim's fields, envisioned Yorktown as a bulwark, his 72 guns a ring of iron, the Royal Navy's sails his salvation. His officers, sipping Madeira in plantation parlors, pictured parades in London, pensions secured, the rebellion a footnote in regimental lore. The men, from London's docks to Edinburgh's highlands, dreamed of homeward sails, their brown besses symbols of an empire eternal. Yet the Chesapeake's blockade, de Grasse's 28 ships a wall of oak and bronze, turned expectation to entrapment, the bay's waters mocking their isolation. The bombardment's shells, those iron harbingers with hissing fuses, fell not as abstract peril, but as intimate judgment, bursting in trenches where comrades shared the last of their salt pork, fragments tearing flesh and fraternity. Ewald's Hessian diary captures the despair. Our batteries are silenced, one after another. The once proud Redcoats reduced to shadows and mud, their bayonets rusted, their crimson faded to the color of defeat. The failed crossing, boats tossed like toys in the gale, stranded 200 under cannon fire, drowning 50 in the York, shattered the last illusion of escape. Cornwallis's letter, a plea from a cornered fox. The storm prevented further passage. The Parley, that boy's timid taps, stripped the veneer of invincibility. O'Hara's sordid gesture of ghosts, offered to the wrong hand. Lincoln's acceptance, a quiet reclamation. What they expected, a swift subjugation, the empire's fist closing on rebels. dissolved into surrender's sting. The Redcoats, symbols of dominion, now cloaks of capitulation, their world inverted in a Virginia field. The ledgers of that inversion are unyielding, inscribed in the iron and ink of the age. De Grasse's fleet, 28 ships of a line, mounting 1,200 guns, delivered broadsides of 1,800 pounds per salvo, outgunning Gray's 19 vessels by 400 pieces, sinking the terrible and crippling 5, as the Admiral's log attests. The enemy fled with heavy losses. The Chesapeake clash, 4 hours of fury on September 5th, left 336 British casualties to France's 209, Graves' dispatch to the Admiralty admitting the enemy was superior in number and position. Washington's 400-mile march, executed in 15 days with 100 wagons and 3,000 horses, forded the Hudson under feints, his headquarters papers noting the utmost secrecy observed, arriving at Williamsburg September 26th with 16,000 men. The first parallel, 2,000 yards of trench dug in 36 hours by 5,000 laborers, zigzagged to deflect enfilade, gabions of woven willow shielding against musket fire, Perdue Portail's engineering sketch. October 9's opening salvo, 50 guns and mortars firing 3,000 rounds in 10 days, reduced British works by 70%, French ordnance logs at the Archives Nationales recording 2,000 round shot, 1,000 shells, 500 canister. Mortars, 8 and 10-inch, lobbed 200-pound bombs with 4-second fuses for airburst, scattering 200 fragments. Captain Olney's memoir vivid. The bombs burst over us like thunder, fragments whistling like hail. Canister from 24-pounders, packed with nails, mowed sorties, while hot shots set batteries ablaze. Redoubt assaults. Hamilton's 400 Americans scaled Redoubt 10 with ladders, bayonets fixed, 9 killed and 25 wounded to 18 British dead, Olney recounting. We rushed them with a bayonet. The fort was ours in 20 minutes. French at Redoubt 9, for 100 strong, used grenades and axes, 18 dead to 25 British, Baron Viominal's report. The enemy was overwhelmed in minutes. Cornwallis's October 16th evacuation, 900 crossed in flatboats before gale, 200 stranded under 50 cannon fire, 50 drowned, his letter to Clinton. The storm prevented further passage. Parley October 17th, boys drum from the 23rd Regiment. Morehouse terms where O'Hara offered Rochambeau's sword, redirected to Lincoln. Washington's orderly book, The Honors of War Denied. October 19th surrender, 7,247 British laid arms in mile-long march. Band playing The World Turned Upside Down, 7,794 muskets stacked, 244 artillery captured, Clinton's tally. A Saratoga-scale capitulation. Allies 389 casualties, British 325 dead, 70 wounded, 8,885 prisoners. That Parley's echo, a boy's taps in the dawn, reshaped the Redcoats' world from conquerors to cautions, their crimson a banner of lessons etched in defeat. They had sailed from Portsmouth expecting the colonies to buckle like the French at Quebec, their lines a wall of wool and will, brown besses barking in unison to shatter rebel resolve. Cornwallis, the Minden veteran, foresaw Yorktown as a bastion, his 72 guns a chorus of defiance, the Royal Navy's sails his chorus of deliverance. Officers, quaffing claret amid Virginia vines, envisioned London triumphs, their epaulets bright with glory. The ranks, from Yorkshire weavers to Scottish crofters, harbored hopes of bounty and home, their bayonets the edge of empire's advance. Yet the Chesapeake's blockade, de Grasse's 28 hulls a cordon of copper and canvas, transformed anticipation to anguish, the bay's expanse a mocking void where relief should have anchored. The shell's descent, those hollow, iron oracles with sputtering fuses, arrived not as remote rumble, but as reckoning, exploding in redoubt shadows where mates share the last crust, fragments carving flesh and fraternity. Ewald's Hessian lament rings true. Our batteries are silenced, one after another. The once unyielding Redcoats bent in trenches, their muskets cold, their coats sodden symbols of stalled supremacy. The gale's fury, scattering boats like leaves, stranded 200 on Gloucester Point under cannon's roar. 50 claimed by the York. Cornwallis's plea a whisper. The storm prevented further passage. The parley, that timid rhythm, stripped the armor of arrogance. O'Hara's sordid gesture of ghosts. Lincoln's receipt a reclamation of dignity. What they anticipated, a subjugation swift as Camden's rout. The Empire's fist closing on upstarts, unraveled into reversal. The Redcoats, emblems of dominion, now threads of a tapestry torn. Their worldview inverted in a Virginia mire, where the rebels' grit and France's forge proved might's true measure, not in numbers, but in the unyielding heart. The archives of that reversal are unsparing, bound in the bindings of ledgers and letters, where iron's toll and ink's testimony converge. De Grasse's 28 ships, mounting 1,200 guns, unleashed broadsides of 1,800 pounds per salvo, outgunning Gray's 19 vessels by 400 pieces, sinking the terrible and crippling 5. The Admiral's log entry stark. The enemy fled with heavy losses, our position secured. The Chesapeake's 4-hour clash on September 5 left 336 British casualties to France's 209, Graves' Admiralty dispatch admitting. The enemy was superior in number and position, forcing our withdrawal. Washington's 400-mile trek, executed in 15 days with 100 wagons hauling 100 cannons and 3,000 horses, forded the Hudson under decoy ovens baking phantom bread, his headquarters papers noting, the utmost secrecy observed, columns divided to confound. Arriving at Williamsburg September 26th, 16,000 men encircled Yorktown, the first parallel, 2,000 yards of zigzagging trench, 8 feet deep, dug in 36 hours by 5,000 laborers, gabions of woven willow shielding against musket fire, as do Portail's engineering sketch attests. The lines advanced under cover, enemy fire deflected. October 9 salvo, 50 guns and mortars hurling 3,000 rounds in 10 days, demolished 70% of British works. French ordnance logs at the Archives Nationales tallying 2,000 round shot, 1,000 shells, 500 canister. Mortars 8 and 10-inch, lobbed 200-pound bombs with 4-second fuses for airburst, scattering 200 fragments. Olney's memoir vivid. The bombs burst over us like thunder, fragments whistling like hail. Canister from 24-pounders, nails and balls packed tight. Mode sorties, hot shot igniting batteries. Redoubt assaults. Hamilton's 400 Americans scaled Redoubt 10 with ladders, bayonets fixed, 9 killed and 25 wounded to 18 British dead, Olney recounting. We rushed them with the bayonet. The fort was ours in 20 minutes. French at Redoubt 9, 400 strong, grenades and axes in hand, 18 dead to 25 British, Baron Vominal's report. The enemy was overwhelmed in minutes. Cornwallis's October 16th evacuation, 900 crossed in flatboats before gale, 200 stranded under 50 cannon fire, 50 drowned, his letter to Clinton. The storm prevented further passage. Parley October 17th, boys drum from the 23rd Regiment. More house terms where O'Hara offered Rochambeau's sword, redirected to Lincoln, Washington's orderly book. The honors of war denied. October 19th surrender, 7,247 British laid arms in mile-long march. Band playing The World Turned Upside Down, 7,794 muskets stacked, 244 artillery captured, Clinton's tally. A Saratoga scale capitulation. Allies 389 casualties, British 325 dead, 70 wounded, 8,885 prisoners. That parley's fragile rhythm, a boy's taps in the gathering light, etched a chasm in the Redcoats' certainties, their crimson a canvas where expectation bled into reckoning. They had crossed from Portsmouth expecting the colonies to yield like the French at Quebec, their lines a bulwark of wool and will, Brown Bess's barking volleys to shatter rebel resolve. Cornwallis, the hero of Blenheim's fields, envisioned Yorktown as bastion, his 72 guns a symphony of defiance, the Royal Navy's sails his salvation. Officers, quaffing claret amid Virginia vines, pictured London triumphs, epaulets bright with glory. The ranks, from Lancashire looms to Scottish glens, harbored hopes of bounty and home, their bayonets the edge of empire's advance. Yet the Chesapeake's blockade, De Grasse's 28 holds a cordon of oak and bronze, transmuted anticipation to anguish. The bay's expanse a mocking void where relief should have anchored. The shell's descent, those hollow, iron oracles with sputtering fuses, arrived not as remote rumble, but as intimate judgment. Exploding in redoubt shadows where mates shared the last crust, fragments carving flesh and fraternity. Ewald's Hessian lament rings true. Our batteries are silenced, one after another. The once unyielding redcoats bent in trenches, their muskets cold, their coats sodden symbols of stalled supremacy. The gale's fury, scattering boats like leaves, stranded 200 on Gloucester Point under cannon's roar. 50 claimed by the York. Cornwallis's plea a whisper. The storm prevented further passage. The parley, that timid rhythm, stripped the armor of arrogance. O'Hara's sword a gesture of ghosts. Lincoln's recede a reclamation of dignity. What they anticipated, a subjugation swift as Camden's rout. The Empire's fist closing on upstarts, unraveled into reversal. The redcoats, emblems of dominion, now threads of a tapestry torn. Their worldview inverted in a Virginia mire, where the rebels' grit and France's forge proved might's true measure, not in numbers, but in the unyielding heart. The archives of that reversal are unsparing, bound in the bindings of ledgers and letters, where iron's toll and ink's testimony converge. De Grasse's 28 ships, mounting 1,200 guns, unleashed broadsides of 1,800 pounds per salvo, outgunning Gray's 19 vessels by 400 pieces, sinking the terrible and crippling 5, the Admiral's log entry stark. The enemy fled with heavy losses, our position secured. The Chesapeake's 4-hour clash on September 5th left 336 British casualties to France's 209, Graves' Admiralty dispatch admitting. The enemy was superior in number and position, forcing our withdrawal. Washington's 400-mile trek, executed in 15 days with 100 wagons hauling 100 cannons and 3,000 horses, forded the Hudson under decoy ovens baking phantom bread, his headquarters papers noting, the utmost secrecy observed, columns divided to confound. Arriving at Williamsburg September 26th, 16,000 men encircled Yorktown, the first parallel, 2,000 yards of zigzagging trench, 8 feet deep, dug in 36 hours by 5,000 laborers, gabions of woven willow shielding against musket fire, as do Portail's engineering sketch attests. The lines advanced under cover, enemy fire deflected. The flickering light of single candle casts long shadows across the worn oak table, where a yellowed map of ancient frontiers lies unfurled, its ink faded like memories etched in time. The air is still, heavy with the scent of aged paper and distant rain, as if the ghosts of battles long past linger in the silence. We have journeyed through the dust of forgotten fields, the clash of steel, and the whisper of strategies that shaped empires and broke them. From the first tentative steps of a fledgling republic to the thunder of legions that spanned continents, these stories remind us that history is not a gallery of triumphs alone, but a tapestry woven from the threads of human resolve. The quiet courage of the nameless soldier, the bold vision of leaders who dare to dream beyond the horizon, the unyielding pull of fate that turns the wheel of nations. In every era we explore, a truth emerges, unyielding as stone. The past is not a relic to be dusted, but a mirror reflecting our own fragile humanity. The archers who once stood on the margins of Roman might, their bows a humble counter to the sword's glory, teach us that adaptation is the empire's true armor. The redcoats at Yorktown, their crimson a defiant blaze against the tide, reveal how the sea's caprice and an alliance's spark can topple the mightiest fortress. And Roanoke's silent crotone, carved in bark and swallowed by mist, whispers that mystery is the seed of discovery, urging us to seek what lies beyond the known shore. These moments, raw and resonant, bind us to those who came before, not as distant figures, but as kin in the eternal struggle for meaning amid chaos. As the candle gutters low, its flame a fleeting echo of torches that lit the march of ages. Let us carry these tales forward. They are not burdens, but beacons, guiding us to honor the fallen, question the victors, and embrace the unknown with the same fierce curiosity that drove humanity's first steps into the wild. For in the end, history is our story, unfinished and alive, a call to witness, to remember, and to rise. Thank you for joining this journey through time. If these echoes stir something in you, share them with another soul. Until our next descent into the depths of the past, walk with the weight of what was and the light of what may yet be.